Attachment is based on fear and insecurity. Detachment comes from an unquestioning belief in the power of our true self. When you know the truth about who you are, you're free. Detachment brings freedom. Attachment constricts and binds you to the past. Some of the ideas I'm sharing with you today come from Deepak Chopra's book, The 7 Spiritual Laws of Success. He says that we plant the seed, and then we need to release all ideas about how that seed turns out. Don't we have a great music team? And they're so great at picking the right and perfect songs, too. Well, my topic this morning is the wisdom of uncertainty. And what I should tell you is ministers always need to be careful what they talk about, because usually they then have to kind of live it out. And this morning has been filled with uncertainty. The slides weren't quite done, and I want to commend the team, Jennifer and Des and Anaya and Audrey, for doing such a great time at the last minute getting everything together. So I don't think there's a whole lot of us that are comfortable with uncertainty. Is there anyone here who's comfortable with uncertainty? Oh, good. All right. Well, we like to know that we know, and know that we know that we know. And yet things feel very uncertain, especially now during these times, don't they? And yet if you listen to people, everyone is espousing their truth, and they're just so sure they're right, and they're not open to listening to anyone else's opinions. And maybe that's because our Western culture was sort of built around attaining things, and we get very attached to those things. And so before we can look at uncertainty and detachment, maybe we need to look at attachment. And so what are some of the things we're attached to in life? Well, as I said, we're attached to our ideas and our opinions. We have a whole political system built around that. People that are sure they're right on both sides of the issue. And of course, we have rallies and protests and sometimes violence. Most recently, we've seen that in our universities, people protesting what's going on in Gaza. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. Not at all. Nobody knows what's going to happen. We've got a couple of wars going on. We have an election going on. Even in our church, we're a little uncertain. We're starting the search for our new minister, and who are we going to hire, and are we going to find the right person this time? Well, I've recently come up with a new idea that if I don't get what I want in life, whatever it may be, instead of immediately moving into fear, I'm going to say to myself, well, this could get interesting. At least that's my plan. It opens me up to curiosity. Curiosity is tolerance of the unknown, tolerance of uncertainty. And so next time you find yourself experiencing uncertainty or anxiety about something that's happened or what might happen, see if you can switch that feeling of anxiety into curiosity. I had a minister once. Before I was a minister, I was a congregant like you in a Unity Church in California, and she had a congregant come up to her and was lamenting that she had lost her job. And the minister said, "Wonderful!" She said, "That means there's something even better waiting for you." Now, that would be great if we could do that, right? But usually, we're so attached to how we think life should be. And at one point, and I don't know why, but at one point, the board fired this minister. And you know what she did? Instead of getting upset, she threw a party for her staff because she said, something better was on its way. And the board was so impressed that she did that, they hired her back. That's the kind of minister I want here. So we're also attached to our possessions and our money. We're attached to our way of being. This is how I choose to live my life, and I'm right in living it this way. Someone might say I'm a vegetarian and I believe eating meat is wrong. I never thought I would give up eating meat. In fact, when I was going to that church in California, they had a guest speaker, John Robbins, who was going to come and talk about his book, Diet for a New America. And somebody said to him, "Oh, once you hear him speak, you will never eat meat again." Well, guess what? I didn't go hear him speak. I wasn't ready to give up meat. I was pretty attached to it. Now, I now don't mostly eat red meat. I eat chicken and fish because I had a really good friend who had really good cholesterol, and she had to have bypass surgery. And I have bad cholesterol, and I thought, ooh, maybe I should change something here. Did you know the Fillmores, who are co-founders of Unity, were vegetarians? And there's an inn at Unity Village, which is our headquarters, and they used to only serve vegetarian. Now, that's changed, and I'm sure many of you are glad that being a vegetarian was not a requirement for being in Unity. We get attached to our way of being in life, whatever it may be. You know, maybe it's, I don't like watching television, there's too much violence. Or we get attached to our mate's way of being, and if they don't act the way we think they should, we don't know how to behave. You know, I really think that's why a lot of marriages break up when one partner gets sober. Because even though they didn't like the drinking, they don't know how to act with this new person. Now, attachment to the known is probably the one most of us have in common. The known is familiar. Even if we don't like it, there is security in what we know. But the known is limiting. It's our past. And if we want to move forward in life, we must be willing to leave the past behind, even if we think it was perfect. I want to repeat that. We need to leave the past behind, even if we think it was perfect. We have to be willing to enter into the unknown. I think that's why I like Star Trek so much. At the beginning of every episode, there's a voice that says, "Space, the final frontier. Our continuing mission is to explore strange new worlds, to seek out new life and new civilizations, and to boldly go where no one has gone before." That's our mission. All of us here today could say, "Spirit, the final frontier. Our continuing mission is to explore new realms, new ideas, new life, and to boldly go where no one has gone before." That's why we're here, to explore what it means to live as spiritual beings in this strange world of humanity. You know, we've done a pretty good job of learning what it's like to be human, and now we need to remember the truth of who we are, which is divine and spirit. And that means being willing to let go of our idea of how we think it should be. It means being willing to step into uncertainty, to curiosity, to be willing to live in the question, to live in that mystery. In Star Trek, they have something called the Prime Directive. And the Prime Directive states that in their exploration of new civilizations, they are not to interfere in that civilization's culture or their future. In other words, don't presuppose that you know what is right for someone else. It's their process. Just because it wouldn't be right for you, or even just because it looks destructive to you, doesn't mean it's not exactly what they need at that point, in that moment in their life. That means we can't be attached to any outcome for ourselves or others either. Now that can be pretty scary, can't it? It means you can't be attached to your kids turning out a certain way, or your mate being a certain way, or your parents, or your boss, or your minister, or your church, or your country, or even yourself. Now that doesn't mean you can't have a desire or an intention. In fact, you must have an intention and desire. It's part of life. The Bible says, without vision, the people perish. You must have some sense of where you want to end up, both how it comes about and to getting it in the form you want. And yet, at some point, you have to release all attachment to how it comes about. You have to just release that. And to getting it in the form you want, and even getting it at all, even to the process. The goal is to intend the future and accept the present. Attachment's in the past or the future. It's not in the present. In the present is infinite possibility. And yet if we're attached to a particular idea or a particular outcome or a particular process, then infinite possibility could be staring us in the face and we wouldn't recognize it. What we're looking at could be literally staring us in the face and we wouldn't see it. Reminds me of a story in the Bible in Acts 12. This story takes place after the crucifixion, after the resurrection, and after the ascension. And the disciples have been told, go and tell the people the good news, that there's a God who loves them, is there for them, that the kingdom is within them, and is more powerful than any obstacle they could come across. And the disciples had experienced something so powerful that they're willing to lay down their lives. And one by one, many of them are being captured, put in prison, some even put to death. And so Peter is now in prison. And not only is he in prison, it's a very secure prison. There are 16 jailers watching him. There's not only a lock on the cell, but there's a lock on the front gate. And the other disciples and his friends are down the road, and they're praying for Peter to be released. And they're praying, and they're praying, and they're praying. And we're told that in the middle of the night, Peter wakes up and the chains break open, and he's able to walk all right past those jailers. They don't even see him. The gate to the prison opens. The gate to the front gate opens. But he knows, he's an enemy, and so he has to get away. As soon as they find him, they'll put him back in prison. So he goes down the road to his friend's house, and he's knocking on the door. And he's knocking on the door. And his friends are inside praying. And finally, one of them, Rhoda, comes to the door and looks out, and she comes back and she goes, Peter, I think Peter's at the front door. And they said, no, he's not, he's in jail. And they're praying, and they're continuing to praying. And she goes and looks again, and she comes back and says, I'm pretty sure it's Peter. And they said, no, we are praying for God to help him. So here was Peter standing at the door, and here are the disciples inside praying for Peter to be released, but they are so stuck in their head that he's in prison, so much so they can't even open it up to the possibility that he might be right outside their door. He didn't show up in a manner or a way that they expected, and so they didn't even pay attention. Now, how many times have we prayed for something, but it didn't show up in the way we thought it would, or the manner we expected? And so we didn't even notice. We didn't pay attention. There's a story that's been shared here recently and numerous times, but it's so fitting here. And some of you may not have heard it, so I'm going to tell the story in depth this morning. So during the recent heavy rains, there was an area that was flooded, and rescue teams were sent out to tell people to evacuate their homes. And there was one man in this particular neighborhood who was very religious, and he was praying to God to save him. And there was a rescue team that came by in a car to rescue him, and he said, no, God's going to rescue me. And the water continued to rise, and the man was forced to go upstairs, and then he saw a boat go by, and they go, we got room for one more. He says, no, I'm okay. God's going to rescue me. And the water rose, and he had to get up on the roof. And this time a helicopter came by, and again, the man refused to go with them. And guess what? The water rose up higher, the man drowned. So now he's standing in front of his Creator, and he says to God, what happened? I prayed for you to save me. And God said, what do you mean? I sent you a car, a boat, and a helicopter. That man had a very narrow perception of what he thought he needed to be saved. And because of that narrow perception, he missed all the opportunities that life presented to him. He wasn't even open to seeing them because they didn't fit the picture he had in his mind. Attachment is based on fear and insecurity. Detachment comes from an unquestioning belief in the power of our true self. When you know the truth about who you are, you're free. Detachment brings freedom. Attachment constricts and binds you to the past. Some of the ideas I'm sharing with you today come from Deepak Chopra's book, The 7 Spiritual Laws of Success. He says that we plant the seed, and then we need to release all ideas about how that seed turns out. It's important to plant the seed, to have the intention, to have the desire, the goal, the dream. Make a commitment to it. Be willing to do whatever it takes, and then give up all attachment to it. It's important to have a plan, but it's equally important that you understand it's just a plan, and that plans can change if need be. Just because you set a plan in motion doesn't mean you can't be open to a new plan. Oftentimes people get so attached to their plan that they're reluctant to let go of it when situations change, and to see that maybe something greater is trying to be born. There was one time, a long time ago, I was driving my car, and there was this big bug. It was a grasshopper. It was in my front window, and it was so distracting. It was bothering me. So I pulled over, and I decided I was going to try to get the grasshopper out. So I found this piece of paper, and I kept sticking the paper in front of the grasshopper, and every time I did that, the grasshopper would change course. And I kept doing it, the grasshopper kept, and I thought, boy, if this grasshopper only knew that I was just trying to save him and release him. And he's getting frustrated because, he's trying to go in a direction and I'm making him move. And how many times do we set off in a direction? And some barrier seems to appear in our path. We get frustrated. And we keep trying to go in the direction we were headed. And of course, if we're committed to our path, we should keep trying to overcome barriers. And yet at what point do we say, gee, maybe this is trying to lead me in another direction? Maybe it's trying to set me free. I was eventually able to get that grasshopper and set it loose, but it wasn't easy. When we think that we know all the answers, or when we've decided how things should be, then we've closed the door to creativity. And there's no room for spirit to work. Our spirit group recently finished a book called The Surrender Experience by Michael Singer. He was a man who meditated a lot. I mean, a lot. Hours and hours and hours a day. And he so wanted to stay in that meditative state of connection that he made a decision to surrender to whatever life presented him with. He would be headed in a direction, and somebody would come forward and present him with something that would lead him in another direction, and he surrendered. And it always turned out good. Even when the FBI raided his office and charged him with a crime, he surrendered. He knew he was innocent. He trusted the process. Now, he had a lawyer who was, working for him, but he trusted the process and he didn't move into fear. And they eventually dropped the charges, found the person who was responsible. I'm wondering how many of us could do that, to stay in that space of uncertainty and just trust. We could simply stay in curiosity and say, this could get interesting. This could get interesting. Uncertainty is a space of possibilities. Bertrand Russell said, the problem with the world is that fools and fanatics are always so certain of themselves, and wiser people so full of doubt. Course in Miracles Lesson 3 says, I do not understand anything I see. We see something or we experience something and we usually assign a meaning to it. It's good or it's not good. It means something. And yet, what if we just stayed curious? True wisdom arrives when we acknowledge that we don't know everything there is to know. And our fear is that if we don't know now, we'll never know. There's a great song by Stogood. They've been here a few times, so maybe you've heard it. The song goes, I'll always know what I need to know when I need to know it. And every time I forget that's so, the universe will show it. There seems to be a plan that works, and there's no way I can blow it, because I always know what I need to know when I need to know it. When I need to know it. So we can give up the fear of not knowing and the need to always know and stay open to all possibilities. Deepak says, one characteristic of the field of all possibilities is infinite correlation. The field can orchestrate an infinity of space-time events to bring about the outcome that is intended. But when you're attached, your intention gets locked in a rigid mindset and you lose fluidity, the creativity and the spontaneity inherent in the field. When you get attached, you freeze your desire from that infinite fluidity and flexibility into a rigid framework which interferes with the whole process of creation. He goes on to say, the law of detachment, or I would say uncertainty, accelerates the whole process of evolution. When you understand this law, you don't feel compelled to force solutions. When you force solutions on problems, you only create new problems. But when you put your attention on the uncertainty and you witness the uncertainty while you expectantly wait for the solution to emerge out of the chaos and the confusion, then what emerges is something very fabulous and exciting. There can be excitement in uncertainty when you're willing to let go of the known of how you think it should be and be open to the mystery. Deepak gives us 3 practices to put this into use in our daily life. The first one is make a commitment to detachment. I will remember the prime directive in Star Trek by not rigidly imposing my ideas of how things should be on others or even myself. I will practice not forcing solutions or problems, and by allowing myself and others the freedom to be as they are. I will participate in everything with detached involvement and with curiosity. Number 2, I will embrace uncertainty. I will be willing to let go of the known and step into the unknown, allowing solutions to spontaneously emerge out of the confusion, the disorder, and the chaos. The more uncertain things seem to be, the more secure I will feel, because my uncertainty is my path to freedom. Through that wisdom of uncertainty, I will find my security. Now, I've learned some of the time, mostly, to trust the chaos. It doesn't always feel good, but I know that if I stay open to new ideas and new information, things will eventually find order. We teach in Unity that there's a divine order that's always at work. So trust it. Number 3, I will step into the field of all possibilities and anticipate the excitement that can occur when I remain open to an infinity of choices. When I step into that field of possibilities, I will experience all of the fun and adventure, magic and mystery of life that comes out of that willingness to be open to whatever life may have in store for us, even when it doesn't look like it would lead us in the direction we want to go. Remember that grasshopper? Maybe what looks like a roadblock to us is actually the vehicle of our freedom into something even more wonderful. The Tao Te Ching said, when they think that they know the answers, people are difficult to guide. When they know that they don't, people can find their way home. And that's what this spiritual journey is all about. That's what spiritual success is about, finding our way home. Be willing to find the wisdom in uncertainty and be willing to stay open to the mystery of it all. God bless you.
Divine love, through me, blesses and multiplies all that I am, all that I give, all that I circulate, and I am grateful.